Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Mastering Monday. This is Brandon S. Heyer, and today we have Eric Van Wagner from Groove U here in Columbus, Ohio. How you doing, Eric?
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about Groove U.
Groove U is a 2-year music business school where you can do, obviously, the audio production part of things, which is a fairly popular thing. But we have just as much of an emphasis on the business-specific things. Our main focus is there's a lot of real-world application. There's a lot of hands-on, and everyone that's here is also active in the industry, which I think is the best way to do it. So you have some real-world examples coming back at you from your professors.
That's very cool. So are we talking active in the industry locally or regionally or nationally?
With the internet anymore, it's kind of tough to say whatever. I mean, I've sent sessions to New York and I've sent sessions to Europe, so I don't know if you want to call that international or not.
I guess you could call it international.
All of the above.
Okay.
We have people that are in the local stagehand union. A lot of our guests that come in are working engineers that have been on major tours. Yeah, there's a lot of people contributing, and they've all been in there. We're not totally academic.
Okay, well, that's very cool. Now, we are here in Groove U's Mastering Suite, and this room sounds amazing, by the way. Tell us about this room.
As we've been growing, we decided that we really wanted a very dedicated room that was very typical for the rooms that you would be in when you're working. So we spent a lot of time in our acoustics class doing the math in this room, figuring out what we needed to do. We realized that we had enough of these Spiral Groove speakers to make up a complete 5.1 system. And that was too good of an opportunity to pass up, because these are very nice speakers. And actually, we got these speakers through a deal with Brian Lucy, who is the rep, who has been mastering the Black Keys, Ray LaMontage. I'm drawing a slight blank, but he's definitely knows what he's talking about, and he uses a version of these himself.
Nice.
So
is he the one who turned you on to these?
Yes. Okay. Totally. I think I want to say we have 8 sets totally. Granted, obviously 3 of them have been taken for this room. But yeah, they're throughout they're in our Studio B, they're in some of our production suites. They're kind of scattered throughout the building. So the students really get a chance to know what's really going on in their mix, for good or bad.
And I've sat in that sweet spot and listened to this system. Those speakers definitely are legit. So I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Now, being that this is a school, I imagine that you don't just kind of start at the end of the process of mastering. You guys have to start somewhere. Where do you typically start when you're teaching students about mastering?
We actually have this class as a mixing and mastering thing, because I think that they are so closely related. I don't think you can put the brakes on mixing and then drop it into mastering. The thing that I've found to be useful in teaching this is to grab a track, start them mastering it, and discuss what they did, and right away start the discussion. Okay, so what happened in your mix that when you go back and mix now, you can fix? What have you now, looking at that objective mastering perspective, how does that influence your mix? And I think that when you start doing that and you start, what I typically end up doing is saying, okay, student A is going to do a mix, student B is going to do a mix of their tune. Now, student A is going to master student B is going to master student A. So you don't do your own work. So you have the fresh set of ears, and they learn a lot from each other that way. And you can do that even outside of the schools. Let somebody else, a friend of yours, master your mix with their speakers in their room. And you learn a lot from each other to go, you know what, I ended up taking a lot of 4K out of your mix. So be aware that your monitors may be lying to you and that you probably don't want to go too overboard with that. Those kind of little things. And then they do their next mix with that in mind. And you start to see the student skills growing exponentially, because they're getting feedback. They're hearing it right there. They actually get a chance to mix and master in this same room, so there's a lot of consistency. So yeah, I think mastering has to speak to mixing and vice versa.
Now, what do you feel is the hardest concept for students to grasp generally when it's coming to mastering? And what's the most successful way that you've been able to break through to get that point across?
The biggest thing the biggest issue I've seen in terms of what people think mastering is the perception of what they think it is. And the best way I've figured out how to get this across is an analogy. I think of the entire process. Think of the entire process as building a car. The songwriter grabs the parts, figures out where they go, and starts to assemble it, essentially. You go into the studio, you start your production, you're going to tweak some things, maybe the steering wheel's a little higher or whatever. You're really putting all the pieces together, but you're also going to go ahead and upholster the seats, you're going to paint the car, you're going to do all of that stuff in mixing. You're deciding what the final product's going to be. The mastering engineer's job, and most mastering engineers that I speak to agree with this, the mastering engineer's job, people commonly think that it's their job to paint the car and put their stamp on it. And it's not. Your job as a mastering engineer is to polish the car and make sure that it looks really snappy when it goes down the road. And make sure that it looks just as nice as the other cars in the showroom. So to a certain degree, and this is not I'm going to oversimplify here for a second, mastering is not a creative part of this process. It's the utility at the end of it. So it's not my job to take your mix and make it into something new. It's to take your mix and clean it up and tighten it up a little bit and just have that last objective view on your mix that says, you've lived with this for too long. I saw where you were going, but you're probably too biased to get there. And hopefully that's very small moves. In technical terms, there's a fine line between mixing and mastering, really. You're doing all the same things, except you're only doing it to 2 tracks. It's really about perspective, being objective, being a new set of ears. There's not a whole lot of technology that's any different. Mm-hmm. An EQ is an EQ. I know I just grossly oversimplified that, but yeah, the concept of what you're doing is the same. It's all, the difference between mixing and mastering is more concept than technology.
Right. Now, when you're doing mastering work, what is your approach to the balance between dynamics versus overall volume?
Unless I hear otherwise, and I do a lot of acoustic music, especially a lot of classical music and jazz and rock. I do a little bit of everything, but I do a lot of classical. The standard for classical music where everyone says, don't touch it, don't do anything to it. I don't go that purist, but at the same time, you can't make it sound like Death Magnetic either, that Metallica album. So the most objective standard that I found to hit for is the Bobcats' K-series metering. Mm-hmm. So depending on what you're doing, you can do the K14, K18, which basically or K12 if you're doing louder rock. I like to leave dynamics in the mix. I really don't like squashing stuff at all. If you're a rock band and you really want it completely squashed the life out of it, I can't be the guy that does that to you, because in mastering, I'm supposed to be making decisions about, does this sound better than this? Does this sound better than this? Aggressive squashing never sounds good to me, personally. That's not where I'm at. I'm more of a dynamics person. Mm-hmm. And while I don't believe that the loudness war makes sense anymore, there are radio stations, but for the most part, this whole thing about being louder than the next thing on the radio only matters for radio, and radio is not the market share it was. The information has come out that YouTube essentially, for lack of a better term, normalizes everything. So if you took the dynamics out, you're going to be just as loud as the other guy, but his mix is going to sound better because it's more dynamic. And
there's even been discussion about the more dynamic ones sounding louder because they've got those dynamics in them.
This is actually, throughout audio, the thing that I find that is the most lacking in students and even hobbyist engineers is an understanding of acoustics and how we hear, mm-hmm. Which is psychoacoustics. And one of the biggest things is that the lack of dynamics causes your brain to fatigue, and it's harder for you to pay attention. Part part of that is that there's a natural startle response when you hear something loud and quick. Now, not that you should be startled when you listen to music, but the changing of dynamics keeps your brain on its toes going, oh, it just got a little louder. Oh, it just got a little softer. That makes music easier to listen to and more interesting to listen to. When you remove those dynamics, your brain instead goes, it's loud. It's loud. Oh, this is not an issue anymore. This is not, the startle response is gone. It's like, I'm not in danger. This has been constantly loud and I'm still here. So I'm just going to stop paying attention to it. So, your brain doesn't want to listen to heavily compressed music. It's very difficult to do and it's fatiguing. Your hearing will last longer. So yeah, I always fight for dynamics in every situation I'm in.
How did you learn mastering?
I am old enough that there weren't very many schools when I started out, so it's completely self-taught, except for I did get a chance to do a little bit of that. I didn't do a specific apprenticeship, but I did get to watch a lot of people. I was in a band in the 90s trying to get a record deal, and whenever we recorded in New York, we were well rehearsed enough that the rhythm section would literally get the takes down in 1 or 2 takes. We'd be done. And we'd be waiting for everybody else. And I gravitated, as soon as I was done laying my bass tracks, I gravitated to sitting with the engineer and assisting to a certain degree and just watching the process. So I got to see some really good engineers work from that point. And then it's acquaintances and networking, asking around, watching people do things. So it's very little formal training, which is good and bad. The good side to teaching yourself is that you make the networking and all those kind of things was great. The downside is that it took me probably, I want to say it took me 3 or 4 years before I started becoming comfortable with how to use a compressor, with knowing that what I was doing and what to expect from it. At a school, when you have someone that's guiding you and basically keeping you from getting off track and listening to the wrong things, when you have somebody that actually tells you, listen to this, try this, do this, and is guiding you and keeping you away from wasting your time on the dead ends, then suddenly I have students that 9 months later are fine with compression. So there's always the argument about, do you need a school or do you not? I think it depends. You can get to a working point much faster. You might not be building a community as much, but like I said, a big thing about what we do here is we do a lot of networking. We do a lot of real world. So it's the best of both worlds. It's getting you out there and moving quickly. And it's keeping you from wasting your time on dead ends is the idea.
Now, what are some of your go-to tools when you're doing mastering? Do you like to work in the box? Do you use outboard? I don't see any outboard in this room, so I'm assuming it's in the box.
When I master at home, I actually do a lot more of my work at home than I do here. The only piece of outboard I have right now is an Avalon 2044. Everything else is in the box. I'm one of those people that I'll have a box for 1.5 years and then I'll swap it out, and my hardware comes and goes. Since I teach in more than one place and I do a lot of different work in a lot of different rooms for mixing, mastering, it's always either here or at home, but for obvious reasons, I need to know the room. But since I do so much, I do live sound as well. I have all of the Waves plugins, and I use pretty much exclusively Waves. About 95%. There's some other ones I can't live without. The Decapitator, the Soundtoys Decapitator, the new Fabrice's new Air EQ, the guy from Slate. That EQ is awesome.
I haven't tried that yet, but I've heard fantastic.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. I use almost exclusively Waves, and not necessarily because I feel that nothing else is worth it. It's an ease of use thing for me because I can send all of my licenses to the cloud, and then I can come here and open up another computer and pull all the licenses down and then throw them back in the cloud, and then go to my bar gig, and I have Waves multi-rack so I can run my plugins at the live show. I pull down my licenses again. I come here, I pull down my licenses, I throw them back to the cloud. So I can literally go between 5 different rooms in one day and just keep pulling my licenses down to whichever computer they need to be on. So I used to, because I do a lot of mobile and I do a lot of moving around, I used to carry my laptop and my iLok, and then all it takes is once for you to lose that iLok when you realize that you never want to take it out of the house again. So
I've heard lots of horror stories.
That's a big part of. I use primarily Pro Tools, 90% Pro Tools, and I use Logic and Studio One. And the number one reasons I do that is because they don't need an iLok. So, and the other thing that's nice about saying, you know what, I have the Wave stuff and I'm done, and I'm not really looking for too many other things. Put that in context with what I said about the Air EQ that Fab has. I don't really like to go outside of Waves because of my workflow, but that makes it worth it. That thing is awesome. The other thing is I'm also old enough that when I first started recording, it was on tape. It was on analog tape. And then I saw the transition of digital multitracks and then obviously the computer. And although it doesn't make sense for me to go back and get a bunch of hardware necessarily, I believe that limitations are a good thing for creativity. It stretches you a little bit. And to a certain degree, I would rather have all my Waves plugins. Now, there's hundreds of them, so a little bit doesn't completely match this, but I kind of miss walking into a room and saying, this is all I have. I'm going to make it work. And I'm going to know these pieces really well. So instead of downloading I got rid of all the free plugins that I used to own, and I have my Wave stuff and that's it. And there's even some Wave stuff that I don't bother digging into, some of the signature stuff, because I don't want to waste my time doing that. I would rather dig into the C6 and really know that compressor really well, in the same way that when you bought a really nice piece of hardware, you would make sure you knew exactly what it did, and you would work hard with it because you spent an investment in it. It's so much easier now to just buy another $20 plugin and go, cool, and you keep doing that and you never really understand any of them. So yeah, when I'm giving advice to students, I always point out I have nothing but Waves for the most part. That is not necessarily something. If I was strictly a tracking engineer and I had a full studio, I probably would have multiple different plugins. But really, the authorization is the big thing that does it for me.
Right.
Is that I can just go, online, throw my licenses, bring them back down, work, throw them up to the cloud, bring them back down, and just work. So it's a practical thing. I think I finally, with that, gotten rid of a little bit of the gear lust thing, because the gear lust thing can be very distracting.
It can.
I see a lot of people spend more time researching a new plugin for 2 or 3 hours when they should have just sat down and mixed something. And you're gonna get. No one ever walks in the studio, and I tell my students, no one hires you for your gear; they hire you for your ear. So you can get something if it's really nice, and you should. There's a lot of really nice gear out there, but ultimately, learn how to use it. I mean.
Completely.
That's what keeps you working.
Completely agree with you. And, kind of speaking to what you were saying, a little sidetrack from the mastering side of it about, all of the plugins that are out there. I mean, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, then you know that I have the weekly Waves Wednesday series and also the free plugin Friday series. And, I get the referral codes from Waves. People buy their plugins and they use my referral, so I get credit. And then I buy more Waves plugins. I've got more than I can count, and it's getting to the point where instead of opening up Reaper and trying to, work on something, I open up Reaper and I'm trying to figure out which tool I should grab. And then I try, instead of knowing what my go-tos are, aside from the fact that I just switched from Pro Tools to Reaper recently, and that throws a whole different wrench into it because you have to learn a whole new piece of software. But now you add into that all of these new tools that you never, that you just keep getting and getting and getting, and you're not sure where to go to get what you need to do. And sure, I'm doing it as a way of creating content so that other people can speed up their research when they're looking into these plugins. But when it comes time for me to try to mix something, which thankfully right now my own clients are few and far between, but because of other things that I'm doing. But when it comes time for me to try to sit down and mix on my own personal projects, I've got to ignore everything I just bought and just go back to my old go-to standards, and say, okay, well, this is what I know works, and just do all of that and just keep everything new and flashy out of the picture. And I have to force myself to limit what I'm using, or else I sit there and load up a whole bunch of plugins, and then I ask some friends how it sounds, and they're like, dude, this is crap. What'd you do to it? And that happened after I switched over to Reaper. I was like testing a new computer, and I threw every Waves plugin I had on it. I don't know why I did this, but you get into those traps, and it's very easy to fall into those traps. So that's another emphasis on the point that you were making there. But moving on. Absolutely. But moving on, I want to talk about. You touched on some things that I want to go over. You said you started back in the days of tape and hardware, and now it's in the digital age and everything. As an educator, and especially with your life experience going through those various stages of the industry, what are your thoughts on the drastically lower barrier to entry into this field today versus 30 years ago?
This is a common question, because whenever you talk to prospective students, the first question their parents have is my son or daughter going to be able to get a job in this? The barrier to entry is lower, yes, but the thing I tell them every time is, if they're serious and they're good, you will find work. There's more people out there not knowing what they're doing, but if you really know what you're doing, the herd thins out real fast. There aren't that many people that actually know what's going on.
Right.
The great thing about the bar dropping is, as a musician, it's wonderful that everybody has access to these tools, because I've also seen some people bring things to me or play things to me that are really creative, and the ignorance is actually a good thing, because they don't know what they were doing and they got this interesting sound, or they solved the problem in a way that doesn't make any practical sense for somebody that does it for a living, but the way they got around it was interesting, and it maybe took them to a different place in terms of the way they were writing the piece. So I think that it's great that these tools are available, and if it really comes down to being serious about wanting to work, there's not a whole lot of, I don't think there's a whole lot of sweating to do. I actually find that there's like a whole niche of business that comes from people needing you to teach them or fix their mistakes. So,
which is what you're doing.
Yeah. So that's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. The other thing is that the people that really know still can obviously sort out the amateurs from the pros. There is still a certain barrier to entry if you're really serious about this. You can say, well, I bought an M-Box and Pro Tools and I'm going to make a great sounding album. That's great, and an M-Box is okay, but you're not going to come close to competing with, my rack of Neve pre's and my APIs and et cetera, et cetera. I bought an Octava mic, good for you, but let's put it up against my Telefunken. And, if you're that serious, and you're making money enough to afford that, you're going to walk in a studio that has $10,000 worth of mics. That's a barrier to entry. And very few people have that. And if you really want your drums to sound amazing, and you want somebody that spent the money on the acoustics and the microphones and the converters and the preamps, there is still a barrier to entry if you really want to do it right in terms of that stuff.
I got you. Now, as an educator, do you see any trends in any of this, basically? Any trends that you see from people coming in? Any trends that you see going on in the music business in general?
The one trend that I will see, this may be a tangent. I don't know if this is exactly where you're going, but the biggest thing that I would kind of call a trend, and this maybe goes back to the issue question, is that the number one thing I see with students coming to a school to learn recording is a lot of them come with the artist mentality, where I'm going to sit down and I'm going to record this person and I want to do this to their music and I want to do this to their music. No, 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 no. Recording is a service industry if you actually want to be working in it. It's your job to, if the artist allows you, contribute, but you should by no means enforce your will on their piece. And that's usually the biggest hurdle is I really think it needs to sound like this. It's like, I can tell you that's not what they're going for. It would be great if we did this to the bass and this to the bass. They're a Joni Mitchell cover band. You don't need to, right? Not that we've had a Joni Mitchell cover band in here. But that's probably the biggest trend if I would see anything. One trend I'm happy to not see here is that very rarely have I ever seen students trying to be sneaky and acquire cracked plugins. I'm very happy to not see that. And I think that there's a lot more awareness of that. And I don't see that as much as I used to. Maybe people are hiding it from me, but I'm hoping that trend goes away because, I mean, that's a much bigger discussion. But as the industry starts to shrink in certain ways, we're going to be in big trouble if, Sound Toys and Waves and these other companies can't stay in business. I don't think any of them are really in too much danger now, but I know, what was it, Camel Audio? I know they closed their doors, although I think somebody bought
Apple
them.
bought
Apple
them.
bought them out,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah. So
I'm anxious to see what the next incarnation of that is, because frankly, Camel Crusher and Alchemy are like amazing. That was very sad to hear when Camel Audio went out, and I'm anxious to see where they go with that next, and hopefully Apple treats them well. But
one thing I just I remembered is that when you were saying something about the barrier to entry, and the thing to watch is think about photography. Kodak used to be the Pro Tools of photography, and then everybody figured out how to make the digital camera and the film industry, oh my God, what's going to happen? And what ended up happening? You still have professional photographers, but you have a lot more people interested, and the photography industry is still fine. It's still here. So I don't think we're in any danger of going away or anything because of technology or barriers to entry.
Yeah, they've been saying, piracy back since like the cassette tape days started, when people could record their own tracks off of the radio. Well, why would I buy the album? Man, people still bought the album. So,
well, yeah. Now, there's a little bit of an argument in that cassette tape recordings off the radio sounded like crap versus the album, and now you can get the 24-bit recording versus the album, and it's the exact same thing.
Right.
But again, that's a much bigger discussion.
Right. That's a whole different discussion entirely.
But yeah, I don't think that we're in danger of the music industry folding up the tent and going home. I mean, we'll find it'll find a way through it.
It's just going to take some shifts, and then
things are going to change dramatically. Yeah, but I don't think
they already have.
It already has.
Yeah.
Obviously. With the allusions to how old I am, I watched the whole Napster thing happen too. And I went to conventions and watched people, bring out the pitchforks when somebody from Napster showed up and when somebody from the RIAA showed up. It was not pretty. But yeah, sorry. Now I'm going on a bit of a tangent.
That's completely fine. Let me see. If you absolutely had no other option for monitoring than headphones and needed to master a track, would you do it?
I've had to, so yeah.
Okay. What would be some things that you would suggest to, keep in mind and be aware of if that is your environment?
Well, the number one thing is that I would not want to do it without my copy of SpectraFu or at least the Paz Analyzer from Waves. Some kind of thing, especially because the thing that you lose the most of when you're using headphones is you have no idea if the phase relationship between your left and right has an issue. Because you're completely isolated on both sides. The room is out of the equation, so you don't know how the two sides interact. The only way you can deal with that is to be able to look at it on a meter and see if it's correlated and that kind of thing. And so you can get some red flags from that. So, SpectraFu is always up on my desktop whenever I'm doing mastering. So, because there's trusting your ears, and then there's just getting an objective, what's the screen telling me is really going on.
Right.
I think it's great. Why is there's a giant peak at, at 300 hertz or whatever. But yeah, there have been situations where I'm traveling and I have some files with me, and somebody says, "Hey, I need a version of this like yesterday." It's like, okay, well, I can't tell you. Well, wait a week until I get home and my ears I mean, I just have to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So you throw your headphones on and you do what you can and you send it off. Hopefully, it's not anything super crucial, but
not like the next Beyonce record or something.
yeah,
like
hopefully, yeah. Can't imagine somebody would do that to you, but yeah, phase is the biggest issue, and it's just the same as monitor speakers. You better know those headphones. I have a set of Beyerdynamic DT770s, and I've had the same headphones for 14 years, and I know them like the back of my hand because I've replaced the foam earpiece muffs probably 6 or 7 times because they get really nasty and ripped, and you pull them off and put a new one on. But
especially if you have people who sweat a lot wearing them.
Yeah, well, and I do a lot of location stuff, so a lot of times it was my sweat. So, but yeah, when they start to smell, then you really gotta change this. But yeah, just know your headphones as well as you can. It's not impossible to do. It becomes really crucial for you to play it in your car, play it with earbuds, play it with everything else, because.
So to summarize, if I'm understanding correctly, what you would recommend would be extra metering to get visual checks on things that you might not be able to hear because of that limitation, and checking it in real world acoustical environments as opposed to just saying, okay, it's done, and only having listened to it on the cans.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes total sense. That's usually what I recommend to people as well. And I like to throw that question out there to people when I ask them about mastering, because there's so many people who are like, oh, you can't mix with headphones. Oh, you can't master with headphones. And I'm like, just think and do it. You know, I mean, if that's what you're limited to, then don't let that stop you. If you have options, like if you could come in here or mix on a set of AKGs, I would come in here. If you could come in here and master an album or master it on your Beyerdynamics, I'd come in here. But if you only had that option,
yeah,
right, and some people are too scared to even get started because of crap they read online.
Well, here's the thing that is going to run counter to, is going to sound like it runs counter to everything professional, but there's some truth to it. Martin Adkins, he said, and he drops the F-bomb a lot, so I'll clean it up. But he said literally just stop mixing. And that doesn't mean, but what he means by that is, you wrote the song, stop agonizing over which compressor you're using on the thing. The whole point is to put music out for people to listen to and enjoy. And I'm a huge Beatles fan, but are those the most hi-fi recordings in the world? No, but I listen to them all day long. People want to hear the music, and there's a certain point where I don't want to use a double negative.
Don't spend 80% of your time on 20% of the product.
Exactly, and don't just get it out there. There's no. I would never say, well, you can't. I mean, if all you have is headphones, then don't mix it and never release that song. That's stupid. The whole point is to share music, and if that's all you've got, you put it out the best you can. The music needs to come out. There's a saying with film that says films don't get released, they escape. Because somebody finally pulls the plug and takes the master away from you.
I like that.
And there's a discipline that you have to have for yourself that says, I can tweak this and work on it all day long. However, I set a deadline. It needs to be done and it needs to be out. And done is better than perfect. While you want to strive for perfect, done is better than perfect. And remember, there's no such thing as perfect. So you need to release it. I think it was... I'm a big Prince fan too, and I think he was the one that said, Prince and Peter Gabriel have both said something like this. Music is in the moment, and part of the reason I think Prince said that he has so much of a backlog is he said, I'll write all this music, I'll take the best stuff and release it, and the reason that I don't keep going back and just releasing all that stuff is because it's out of date. It's like... it would be like Time Magazine saying, oh, here's that issue we never released from 1976. Let's put it out. It's not relevant anymore. You know what I mean? So there is a time thing to music. If you put out something that, if you have a great grunge album you've been holding on to for 10 years, oops, because you missed the boat on that. Even if, it took me 10 years to get it mixed. Well, you're also 10 minutes too late for anybody to care. So, Yeah, sorry, I'm going on a
No.
tangent again. But yeah, it's about get it out there. Just use what you got and make it happen, and just do it. Don't.
Right.
If you wait until you own $10 million worth of equipment, that's never going to happen.
Exactly.
So.
All right. To wrap all of this up, tell us a little bit more about the school. Anything else that you would like anyone out there in YouTube land to know about GrooveU?
Well, it's April 1st. Oh gosh, wow, yeah, not an April Fool, but we're constantly growing. We're enrolling now for next year. We are constantly active, and one thing that's nice about GrooveU is that we're just about to finish up our third year. The great thing is we're at a point where the class sizes are small. You get a lot of individual attention. We hope to grow, and I'm sure faculty will grow with that. But individual students will get a lot of attention. We're always reevaluating ourselves. We're already thinking about the next renovations, so to speak, to do in this building, in terms of making sure that we're giving students what they need. We're constantly talking to industry professionals, reevaluating the way we teach and what we teach. Speaking and saying what are we doing what do we need to do more of? What are we not addressing? Is there anything new coming down the pipeline that you think is crucial for students to know to get a job? We are very much into staying relevant and current. There's some other great programs there, but they don't have the flexibility to necessarily change course as well as quickly as we do. So
okay,
I think we're in a great position. It's always fun to be at this part of a project when you're still on the growth period, and we're very nimble. We can make a lot of things happen. We have a lot of cool things that we're discussing right now. So.
Okay, where can people find more information about GrooveU?
Stop in. We're in class from 9 a.m. until 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. We're right 2 blocks west of the Short North on 5th Avenue. Stop in and talk. We're always going to be able to make time to do that. Okay. We've had people sit on classes to check it out.
Okay.
So on and so forth. So
awesome.
Yeah, give us a call.
Sounds good. And I have taken a tour of the facility. This is a very exciting thing to be happening here in our backyard in Columbus, Ohio. Definitely didn't have any of this when I was in school and trying to cut my teeth in the industry. So a very good asset to have here in Columbus. So that'll be it for today. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Mastering Monday, and we'll see you next time.